Today we are going to see yet another a new AI project that I have developed, and I call it a Security Architecture Framework Agent. Um, Today, every organization need a security architecture, but imagine building that from the scratch is one of the most time-consuming tasks for security practitioners like myself. So normally, when a security architect they they are in a position to build a cybersecurity reference architecture, they has to read and cross-reference about 7 to 10 heavyweight framework models like SAPSA, TOGAF, SACMAN, NIST framework, Zero Trust. Then there is the industry-specific frameworks. So each of these frameworks are in itself, it's almost about 100 pages of document, and each one covers the security from different angles. So each of this framework have a specific views or a viewpoint about the cybersecurity side of the enterprise. For example, SAPSA tells you why the security matters to the business, and whereas TOGAF that tells you how to transform your enterprise architecture with security focus. And then, of course, there is the NIST that tells you what controls to put in place, and Zero Trust, how to implement the access in a cloud first world. So the problem is that none of these frameworks talk to each other. And the architect has to figure out which framework apply to their specific organization, which specific artifacts within each framework are relevant to the organization, and then synthesize all of that information into a tailored reference security architecture. This process can take anywhere from 6 months to years, and it requires, of course, deep expertise across all the frameworks simultaneously. Organizations pay a ton lot of money to the consultants as well as to the external vendors in order to create this reference cybersecurity architecture. So that whole process is a manual process, and it's also tied to the knowledge expertise of certain group of people or institution. And the attempt of building this particular project is uh, to solve that problem and automate the process end to end. This is the first draft of the demo. Of course, I'm planning to add more layers and capabilities into this, but it was a very interesting project to work on, majorly because of the components that I was able to leverage for this project. Compared to the previous projects, it was either just a front end, and then there is a API call going to the back end. That was the limited scope that I was playing around in the previous use cases demos. This one, um, it also got a front end, but it has a heavy back end and orchestration layer. And there are a couple of new tools like Gemini, Flash, then LangChain, ChromaDB, Fast API that I'm leveraging for this project. I have all this documented in my GitHub, and you can take a look at it. Um, but this is the at a very high level, what is the architecture. And before I go into the architecture, let me give you a quick view of the front end. So it looks like there is on the left hand panel, there is certain tab that requires your organization profile. And what I mean by the organization profile is what's the type of the organization, whether it's a technology, SaaS, or a healthcare or financial service, a government or an enterprise sector. what is the regulatory environment. Financial institutions may be driven by the PCI DSS. Health will be driven by the HIPAA, and then defense or the government sector by the FedRAMP, and so on and so forth. And the architecture maturity, at what level of the maturity model or cybersecurity maturity model that the organization is running at this point, whether it's a very early stage for a startup company, it's going to be initial, right? Or whether there are policies and procedures being documented and defined, or whether it's in a managed state or whether it's running in the optimized state. Majority of the organizations are either between the defined or managed. Organizations that which are in the business for over a decade, those are mostly in the defined and managed, whereas a new startup company is in the initial. And then what is the strategic objective of the organization, whether it's to do the modernization of the on-premises infrastructure, or to migrate from the on-premises to the cloud, or whether it's to go to API first or AI native, mobile first, zero trust, integrate the DevSecOps pipeline. These are certain strategic objectives that we are currently aware of within the industry. So I try to include that as part of the profile. And then you can add in additional context about what is the exact objective that we are trying to achieve within the organization. So the output, which is either a mapping or a diagram that can be specifically been tailored to your requirement. So this is, in a way, it is a very dynamic process. And as I said, it is also coding in or embedding that frameworks into this output, right? Or the code is being used to develop this output. And the code is coming from all that knowledge base that contains the framework data. And if you think about it, normally when a security architect or a CISO joins an organization, one of the important piece of their work is to have a standard security architecture posture within the organization. And standardizing architecture is quite a very tedious task, because there can be multiple architectures, and that multiple architectures frameworks need to be combined to get a standardized overview of how the entire security architecture posture will look like within the organization, touching all the various functional teams, right? So this is what I'm trying to. Normally, this is like a year-long engagement by the vendor partners, and then onboarding them, consultants and everything come, and they get charged for this to through engaging with various stakeholders and everything. So this is sort of automating that entire process. But also there is one important thing to understand, is that this is also based on, there is a vector database that we are using, and that vector database consists of all the actual documents. So this is the technical architecture for this project. So the front end, as we talked about, we just saw that's the front end interface, that intake form where the user, as a security architect, they fill in the organization type and the maturity and etc. And that's the intake that goes in, and that calls the fast API backend, and that is going to, first of all, validate the profile and develop the LLM prompt to call the backend Gemini model. And the Gemini, basically, it parse the JSON file, and then get the citations and return the response. And in order for it to call the Gemini, parse the JSON and get the citations, we have added this orchestration layer that orchestrates all this data flow between various different components, right? So the first, the Chroma DB is a vector database that stores all the different frameworks, and they have created. It's a way of chunking or consolidating all the information as chunks from these source data, and you can see how many chunks are being utilized for about 20 different documents that I uploaded into the vector database. Currently it is running locally. So and once you have the database with all the data files in it, those data files are being ingested into the RAG data pipeline, and the RAG is the retrieval augmentation generative pipeline. And what it does is that instead of retrieving the data itself from the local vector base, instead of doing that, retrieve and fetch the data, it reads the data from the vector database. As a result, the performance can really go up by introducing this particular pipeline, right? And also, if you think about it, in a way, it is not writing into the database. It is reading the data out of the vector database and then feeding into the orchestration layer to the front-end rendering, right? That is a good security posture as well to to introduce into this pipeline. So that's how these are new concepts that's been leveraged for this project, and I'm extremely happy to introduce these additional components, right? Of course, for the efficiency and the performance of this the entire project. So that's the overall technical architecture. And now let's give some examples in here. So let me grab some examples. So I have put the test sample test profiles also here. So here is the organization type is a financial service, regulatory PCI DSS. It's a maturity level managed. And their objective is to cloud first migration and infrastructure modernization. So they are migrating about 40 legacy Java banking apps to the AWS, which is the cloud. Must contain PCI DSS compliance throughout the migration. New CISO hired 3 months ago. The target is the zero trust posture for all cloud workloads by year end. So the way the architect works in this case is they go into, okay, this is a financial service and it need to adhere to the PCI DSS and this is a managed maturity model, and the cloud first migration and the infra modernization is what they are looking, and they are targeting a zero trust posture for this particular project. And this mapping is what is happening. It is the interface is reasoning over the frameworks. As I said, it pulls the data from the by running that RAG data pipeline, right? And it takes couple of seconds, about 40-50 seconds, and this is expected delay because, as I said, some of the tools are running locally also, except the Gemini LLM that's being used for fetch the API key, and then that is used to call the Chroma DB and other databases. So if you see here, as a senior security, the organization cloud first migration modernization and explicit zero trust is a robust architect. SAPSA will serve as the foundational framework, ensuring security initiatives are directly aligned with business attributes. And it's giving a little context of what is to be expected. And if you look at this, these are the security requirements that it is recommending. So initially, the governance side domain is handled, and that's to define a business-driven security strategy for cloud migration. And if you look further into it, you can see that it is going to provide a structured from the SAPSA, which is the contextual architectural layer, and then TOGAF that gives the vision, and then the SAGMAN framework that gives the planner, and then under the NIST, it's a govern component within the NIST CSF framework that it's leveraging, and then in the zero trust, it's a policy engine. And if you click on this sites, you can see that all the reference materials are produced or displayed in a very structured format. And this was something, an additional fine tuning that I had to do. So the intent of this is to, when an architect look at the okay, there is the tog of page number 25. This clause details essential component for effective architecture implementation. So what is it about that particular statement that is relevant to this this particular security requirement under the governance domain? Why it is relevant to this domain, and then what the action the architect need to take, right? That kind of this is as I said, this is not this can look like a summary, but the backbone behind this is to exactly find the raw passage from that framework, so the architect can go back to that one particular raw passage to gather more intel or granularity, right? So that's the intent of this. So it is breaking down all that citations that which it caught for the security requirement number one. And similarly, there is almost about 10 different security requirements that it is highlighting, and it is going to show all the citations for that. So it is, in that sense, it is very powerful, and also you can the architect can really narrow down their work with the help of this tool, right? So there is also a high level diagram, and keep in mind that cybersecurity reference architecture, the diagrams are normally looked from a 60,000 feet above. And so this is a conceptual diagram that we are talking about. I have plans to expand on this for the next phase, but at this point, it gives the top high level conceptual security reference architecture for the cloud first financial service, in which different domains, and these are the major priorities, right? So that's the intent of this particular prototype. And as I said, this is documented within the GitHub, and there are a few other use cases which was very interesting to test as well. I will really encourage, if somebody wants to build on this, develop. So if you see here, AI native SaaS startup, normally for a SaaS company, there is no CISO team or a cybersecurity team. So this could be, all this security architecture and design is handled by the developers itself. So this tool can be not just for an architect to use, but also a developer can use it as well, right? So that's another multi-folded use case, and there are several other use cases for this one. So that's what I have built so far. I hope you look at the GitHub page, and if there is something interesting, connect me on this. I'm also excited for the next phase of this model or this prototype. And the reason why I didn't include the agentic layer to this, because this is sort of the foundation that I have built. And on top of this, I can add the agentic tool calling for certain specific use cases. So that's what I'm thinking at this point. But it is a good foundation to include all the most important functional elements of a AI architecture, right? It got the RAG retrieval, it got the vector database, it got the orchestration layer, and the backend API calling. So it was quite fun to work on this project. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.